Hello?
And you get what
Oh,
you
now
pay
it's
for.
working. OBS is working.
Get what
Okay.
you pay for.
So
yeah.
you guys can do the intro to the. I have all my guests do the intro to the podcast.
I've never listened to your podcast.
Yeah, no one has. Nobody does.
Oh, okay.
So you guys just
So
say like,
is this the intro?
yeah, this is you guys be like, welcome
the
to
intro right now.
this is episode. I don't know. We'll say 4.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there you go. There's your intro.
Yeah, welcome to episode we'll say 4 of the Cass and Blevins show, Fight Night Part 2. Fight Night After
Night.
Dark.
No, that's already trademarked. It's already trademarked. Patent pending.
Thanks. Yeah, that's exactly okay. Perfect. Oh yeah, to this podcast is we have casters here and then someone who's good at the game. So we have Boulevard, Casanova, and Blevins here. I'll introduce yourself. Introduce yourself to the people who might not know you. Starting with Boulevard.
My name is Boulevard. I get all of the shout-outs, copyright, patent pending. You're legally not allowed to shout at anyone else on a Legends of Runeterra stream. I cast a lot, and I'm a world champion.
A literal world champion.
Literal world champion.
All right.
You said all right. What Mo?
I guess it's your turn, Cass.
Is it my turn?
I'm letting this
going,
go
Mo?
wherever it
Yeah.
goes.
No,
Yeah,
it just it just flows, bro. It just goes.
I'm just on the ride.
I know you
right?
guys. Okay, look. I know you guys are professional casters out here with your professional prod team. You probably have Kathy talking in your ear all the time. We don't have that here. You guys just gotta talk. Okay?
Yeah, I got you in my ear instead, and it is just a nightmare. Anyways, I'm Casanova. If you know me from Legends of Runeterra, you may know me from Fight Night, or casting any other number of Riot events for Legends of Runeterra, or you watched my stream 2 years ago and
nobody knows you from
fell
your stream.
asleep for 2 years and woke up and you're like, oh yeah, I saw that stream once. But no, nobody knows me from that. Yeah, I'm a caster. I was a professional Heroes of the Storm player, and then I moved on to other games, and now I've been casting LOR and TFT and a ton of other different random stuff for the last like 2.5 years.
Blevins.
I'm just embracing these just awkward pauses because I know either Mo's gonna leave them in or he's gonna have to edit them out.
Oh
Either
no,
way,
there's no
I'm
editing.
Are you eating, Mo?
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah,
editing.
we talked about what he was eating beforehand. I already
that's true,
alluded
that's
to
true.
it. I'm Blevins. I'm the other Runeterra caster guy who is now apparently a fitness influencer because I get so much more engagement and so many more messages of approval about the like gym pictures I post than
I
literally
like all of them.
anything I've ever done in my entire life.
I don't even think you go to the gym half of the week. If I'm being honest.
I will say this, and I'm being completely serious. Every time I post a picture about the gym, I have gone to the gym that day.
Even the one of you were just chilling in your house. They're just on your computer. You're just
like,
chilling
okay.
in your house. I'll throw the picture up on screen, but probably not because I'm probably not going to rewatch.
I literally took a picture from my house, but if you saw me in real life, there would be no doubt that I was at the gym because I am a very sweaty person. So like, there's no fooling that I have been at the gym or not. But yeah, I literally was like, oh, I forgot. Sometimes I forget and I'm like, oh, I'll take the picture as I'm walking out the door. And then one time I took a picture in the car, and then the one you're referencing, I literally just completely forgot. And I'm like, oh, well, people still want the picture. So here it is of me nowhere near the gym, but having gone.
Onto the Blevins Nike sponsorship.
Well, I've kind of painted myself into a corner with Nike as I've been doing this reverse campaign for them, where instead of saying positive things and they pay me, I keep saying negative things until they pay me to stop. So Nike, terrible shoe. It's garbage, and the second I put a Nike shoe on my foot, my both my feet break. So I will continue slandering Nike until they pay me to stop.
Oh. Well, in other news, this week's episode is actually brought to you by Nike. Use code MO for
Hey!
20%. No, I'm just kidding.
I actually literally, no joke, bought Jordans 2 days ago. So
Yeah, nice.
I'm actually lying about all this, except for the part where I got Jordans. I actually did that.
See, where's the Jordan picture on Twitter?
Once they come in, I'll post it.
I see.
I'm gonna be rocking them at the Calling Indy.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, I gotta have some fly new kicks.
Okay. But yeah, so here we have 3 excellent casters. You've all been casting Runeterra. How long have you been casting Runeterra? Since the game came out, basically 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think all of us got started around the same time.
Yeah. Pretty much the first Riot sponsored tournament there was a Korean tournament. And at the time I was like planning to be a competitive player. And I was just making content, and I was like, okay, well, I could co-stream this. And I asked Riot if I could co-stream it, and they gave me permission to. And so I cast that, gave it an English commentary with Astrogation, if anybody remembers that name that's listening. And we covered that game, and then after that, DOR approached me and asked if I would start casting those tournaments and streaming them. And I just kind of like kept going with it. Just like it was like working out, because I was casting TFT at the time, and I had been casting League of Legends a little bit as well, for collegiate, and then doing Giant Slayer. Well, Giant Slayer didn't exist yet, but it kind of did. Giant Slayer TFT had a fight night at the time, but it just wasn't on a Giant Slayer channel yet. It's old wisdom lore. Anyways, I was casting the original fight night for TFT at that time as well.
Yeah, and I saw the article about Casa getting approval to stream the event, and then I looked on YouTube and it wasn't there, and I said, okay, I'm also going to do the event then, but I put it on YouTube.
Okay. So you got, like, get it on all the platforms so people can see it. That's cool. That's smart. Yeah. Okay, but Blevin, what's your getting into LOR casting?
It's basically very similar to Casa. I don't even remember how it. I think you Astrogation. I don't remember if he couldn't do it one of the times or he didn't want to, but I remember you DMing me and being like, "Hey, do you want to cast this LOR event?" And I go, "Yeah, sure, let's do it."
Because Blevin reached out to me and said, "Hey, if you ever need a co-caster for anything, let me know." And then literally the next, like, it was like a day later, and it was probably only a few days after the Riot thing, or like a week after, Sparkling Iced Tea sent me a message, and Pave sent me a message saying that they had Legends of Dock, which was a German tournament, and they were like, "Do you want to do the English cast for this?" And so Astro couldn't do it, and Blev had literally just messaged me like, "Anytime you need a caster, let me know." I was like, "Well, you want to come cast?" And Blev and I just had a really good time, and so we started casting a lot more together for DORs and stuff. Astro was around. We did like patch reviews and other stuff, but he was really busy at the time. And honestly, Blev and I just hit it off really well. So it was just like, at that point, it was like, well, let's just do all these doors and all this stuff together, and we started casting like 13 hours a day, 2 days a week.
Yeah,
for like,
Jesus.
For like, I don't know, 4 months or something.
Oh, are you talking about like doors and jam fests?
Yeah, we do doors and Gemfest, but we would do EU and NA back to back.
God. That is
and
wild.
then it's like, open rounds would be like a 13-hour day, and then finals would be like 10, 11, something like that.
That's crazy. And Blevins, what did you? I don't recall. Did you try to be a competitive player as well, or were you always just interested more in like the content creation style, like the podcast?
I was never going. I never had any hopes or aspirations to be like a competitive player, like Casa was. Like Casa was at the time like top 10 player at least.
He was all right. I smoked
Bro,
his
you
I
platted
smoked
this
his
time or
ass
something.
on ladder. I just want you guys to know that.
Just not-
ladder was and still is a joke.
Okay, but only
but-
when you don't need it to your benefit. And right now it's going to my benefit. I just want everyone to know on record I smoked Cass's ass on ladder.
Sure.
I
But
didn't even know your name until like a year later.
yeah, this is like the Don Draper meme where he's like, "I feel bad for you." He's like, "I don't even think about
Yeah.
you."
It's exactly that.
Yeah. So I knew I did not want to be a competitive player. I understand what it takes to be a competitive player in terms of like time commitment and all that, and I didn't want to do that. So yeah, I was doing the podcast from the very beginning as well as casting, and I don't even remember if I was even trying to stream it at the time, but like I was streaming here and there. But yeah, never really wanted to be a competitive player. Really always just was on the side of content.
Gotcha. Yeah, those early doors and Jam Fest, I competed in a lot of those. I was really bad, so you guys never saw me. I was never on stream.
I was gonna say I don't remember seeing
No,
you in
no,
top
no.
cuts a lot.
No.
when we cast.
I top cut one door ever. That was it. And then like I took a break because I was like bad and I was tired of feeling bad. So I was like, I'm just not gonna compete in these things. I'm just gonna focus on like, getting better. But the one I did top cut, Casanova roasted the fuck out of me. He was like the entire time. I was playing against BBG, and first of all, I was smoking him game one. It wasn't close, and Casa was still roasting me. And he was just like,
This was
yeah,
back
this
when
guy...
BBG was on top of the world.
Yeah, this was back when BBG was nuts. He was like, yeah, BBG is just like, this just like isn't even close. Like I've never heard Casanova be like actively toxic in a cast except for that one cast. And I was like, what the fuck did I do? Like I was legitimately so confused. Because I was like, oh, it's my first top cut. I'm gonna go watch it, and this caster is just like roasting me. Which, granted, I was shit.
That's really funny.
Don't get me wrong, like I was
so
playing
funny.
horribly, but it was like the game one I won, and I was still getting roasted. And I was like, I don't get it. I'm so confused. But yeah, I remember watching those, and that's when I started seeing like the Casanova and Blevins duo a lot. After then, like Fight Night is iconic, and I started seeing a lot of the like Boulevard and J Doza duo a lot, which J Doza was invited to this, by the way. I just got Dono walled, just so everybody knows.
I was wondering how much shade you're about to.
Yeah.
I was gonna set you up to throw you under the bus, but okay,
Uh-huh.
you lifted the bus beforehand. Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
I invited J Doza, but he straight up Dono walled me, and I was just like, okay, I guess he's too cool to be on my podcast. That's fine. I'll just use these other three guys. But yeah, and I thought that's why I started recognizing these like duos for casting. I was like, oh, these guys are like in it, and now everywhere I go, I see like seasonals. I see you guys cast like basically every like tournament is cast by like one of you four. Like in a tournament, anyways, it's like kind of larger. It has some number of you4 on there, and so I was like, oh, these guys are like nuts. And if anybody wants to get into casting, like they typically ask you guys. And so it's like if somebody wanted to get into casting, I guess like what would be something you guys would tell them in whatever game, I guess, respectively.
In whatever game, yeah, because whatever game is probably a better question than casting lore, I would say.
Mhm.
Yeah, and lore is like don't. My job.
It's I mean I will say like realistically, like if people ask me about like wanting to cast lore, it's like I would first just ask them what their goals are. Like that's the important thing, right? Like, and I
Get
guess you can
rich.
say that for any game too, right? Is like what are your goals initially? Because like, you know, if you want to be someone who like makes it to the very top, like you just got to make a lot of content and get pretty popular if you want to make it to the top. But that starts somewhere, right? Like if you want to get into casting, really the best way to do it is to just cast, like find a community tournament that's happening that doesn't have broadcast, volunteer to like, you know, run a little show and cast it. Like that's what all of us have done to like start in casting, right? Like for me, my journey was a little bit different to originally get into it, where I had just been a pro player in Heroes, and there was like an opportunity that I applied for to go work on a broadcast for collegiate League of Legends. And I got in that way. Like applying is a good thing, but realistically, you're not going to get that chance unless you have some kind of serious background that's going to help you get there. Unless you just start doing it. Like you just need to get the experience, get the reps, build a reel, and then you can start kind of sending applications to the bigger things, the like higher level events, and hoping that you can get in. But it's just like anything else in show business or anything like that, where you have to be really good, and stars have to
Mhm.
align with some amount of luck as well to just even
Mhm.
make it in at the get go.
Mm.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that too, um, being experienced, like getting experience, whether that is like casting community tournaments or even doing like something like a podcast
Yeah.
or just talking with other people or like honestly, I mean, granted, COVID, Omega Lull, but like improv type of classes and stuff. I mean, I've never done improv, but I understand it enough to know that like that would be quite helpful for something like that. Cause like honestly, and we've all seen it where like someone is on cast or like a pro player is on a broadcast or something, and they're just, they're knowledgeable, but they're just not a good broadcaster, right? Where like that's just not where their strengths are, and that's not what you want to have happen for you, right? Like if you have it's like some people have the natural ability to just talk and like talk with other people and like
Mhm.
play off each other and like, if someone asks you a question on the cast, you're not just like, "Yes." And then awkward silence for 3 seconds unless you're trying to troll Mo and that's the
Yeah.
point. But it's like getting like honing your craft and then um figuring out what you want to do, like Casa was saying with it, like specifically, like, do you want to cast a certain game, or do you want to, or even more broadly, like, do you want to be a host? Do you want to be a color caster? Do you want to be a play-by-play caster? Because I think some people are very good at one and not as good at the other, and that's fine. And then some people are more flexible and can kind of be in any role. But I think figuring out what you think is you're best at and like what you excel at, and really leaning into that rather than trying to spread yourself thin, I think is definitely a way to differentiate yourself. Because if it's just like generic clips of you talking, like that's good to show that like what you sound good, but like if you want to be an analyst, like showing specific things of you being analytical and talking about analysis is good. If you want to be a host, you know be a host, right?
Mhm.
Show
I
me your
think it
throws,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah,
right.
like
Anything to add to that, Boulevard?
Pretty much. I think Blevins really nailed it. Where like you kind of find a need, like you need to find what you do better or different than other people. Because if you're just gonna come in and like you're gonna be animated and say all the right things, like there's probably 12 other casters that already do that. You need to
Mhm.
find something that differentiates you that like people aren't doing that you want to see in the broadcast. Like you don't want to be different just for the sake of being different. You want to be different in a helpful way that will elevate the experience for the viewer.
I see. I see. Yeah, I know. You mentioned like caster reels. I feel like reels are. How important would you guys say reels are? Because I know I haven't watched too many caster reels because I haven't really been interested in hiring a caster for anything. Um, but I know like Boulevard's reel is like super iconic, and I love it because his caster reel shows him what is it? You're casting your one of
I
your Grand
I am
Prix
in the
matches or
finals
something.
of game 3 of a Grand Prix,
yeah.
and I have an understanding with my opponent that I am going to surrender the game, and game 3 has just gone to time. If I end the turn, I win the event. And the casters are confused by what I'm doing. They think that the game has ended, and I just like start yelling back to them and like casting the game myself, and just kind of like take it over. And I thought that that was like such a cool moment on camera. I'm like, yeah, this shows a little bit of personality about me. Let me throw this in my reel, see how it goes. And people definitely liked it a lot more than I kind of expected them to.
Yeah, I mean, I have to look at reels all the time, right? Like part of my job. I work as a
Mhm.
producer over at Wisdom, right? Like I look at reels when we are selecting talent for different shows. And like I told Boulevard that I thought that that clip was like probably the best clip from his reel because it's just personality. Like it is just this is his personality, this is that type of thing. It starts to tell me a little bit more about who he is and like what he's going to offer a broadcast. Now, he needs other things to support that. I can't just see
Mhm.
that clip and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to hire this guy." But it's something different, right? It's like an X factor, like what
Mhm.
Boulevard was saying, and I completely agree with. Like you have to find the thing that you do differently because it's okay to be the guy that's just very good and really stable, like going to be a really good talent because you need that on a broadcast. But there's a lot of options for that. And so if you're new, if you're just trying to break into the scene, a lot of times that's just not going to cut it.
Gotcha. Do you think it'd be at this point in time, if you wanted to get into Runeterra, like when do you think it'd be like too late for any game, or do you think it's ever like too late to try and break into a casting scene? Because I know for like the competitive scene and like streamer scene for a lot of games, it ends up being like, oh, the games have been established for like 2 years, so people kind of already have their people they watch. Or viewers have like their streamers that they watch, and teams already signed the players that they want, stuff like that. Or people have this idea of like, oh, X player is good or X streamer is good, so I watch them, so I support them. Is it
I don't
feel like
think
that
it's
with casting?
I don't think it's ever too late to get in. Like, I don't think Vedius started casting the LEC until like 2017, so League was
Mm-hmm.
already like 6 or 7 years old when he got in. For Runeterra, I think if you wanted to like get into Legends of Runeterra casting, I think you would seriously need to think about what your ceiling is. You know, because there are no more seasonals, you can't cast that. So how do
Mm-hmm.
you get like if your goal is to cast Worlds, you need to figure out how you get from grassroots to Worlds, and there is not really a bridge there. It's a very big cliff, and you need to find a way to make that jump.
I will also add that as the old man on this stream, uh people don't think a lot about what is going to happen in 2 or 3 or 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard for humans to like accurately depict that for their own life, right? If we look at 5 years ago, for me, like Runeterra didn't exist. I hadn't cast at that time for like 7 years. I was doing like multiple podcasts on other games that I no longer even think about. And I hadn't played a Riot game since 2009. And
Mm-hmm.
fast forward 5 years and we're here, right? So
Yeah.
like, you have no idea the actual. And I don't know how deep down the rabbit hole you want me to go with this story, but I can tell it if you want. Like the
Yeah,
whole
go
like
for it. We got
origins.
40
Okay,
whole more minutes that you
the
guys have to
origin
fill.
story of how I started at Wisdom, the TLDR, is the fight night that Casa was casting back for TFT. I played in that event, the very first,
The pilot
well,
episode.
the
The
first,
pilot episode you
the
played in,
pilot
yeah.
episode of TFT Fight Night I played in, because the producer, who is still works at Wisdom, she reached out because I did the TFT podcast and was like, "Hey, one of our players dropped out. Do you want to play?" I'm like, sure." From there, I think it was, I don't remember the exact circumstances, Casa, but I think you and Crowan were like going to Europe or something for,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, did you fill in when we went to Europe?
Yes,
Yeah.
Boop and I filled in for you when you and Crowan left, and like, because the Wisdom producer was like, "Hey, Casa and Crowan are going to Europe. Do you want to cast?" And I'm like, "Well, I mean, I've done a lot of podcasts, but I haven't cast since like literally 2011, like Magic the Gathering local PTQ. Like that was literally what I cast." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's just try it." And then like I from there I did a bunch of different stuff for Wisdom, and one thing leads to another, and now we're all Casa and I and a lot of other people that have been in our circle are like, you know, employees of Wisdom, which has grown entirely in a lot of ways too. So like, even it like the short answer is, if you want to get into Legends of Runeterra casting, like it to arc on what Boulevard said, it's like it is a very tall cliff, right? There's not a million different opportunities
Mm-hmm.
right now. But if it's something that you want to do, like you find a way to
Yeah.
do it, and the skills that you're developing and like being a caster, and like it could lead to something else that isn't, maybe doesn't have anything to do with Legends of Runeterra. Maybe you find out that you want to do something different, or maybe someone notices you for something that isn't Legends of Runeterra, but it's a fit for something else. Like, you never know.
Yeah, like, I don't know, let me bring it back a little bit to where you were asking us about getting into casting, and I said if you were gonna ask me just about Legends of Runeterra, I would ask you what your goals are, because that's a big thing for, like, if someone wants to get into Legends of Runeterra. I don't think it's too late to ever get into any game. I think if you've got the talent and you've got the, like, you have this the proper, like, way of attacking it, you can make it into whatever game that you go for. Like
Yeah.
Boulevard brought up new league casters. There's plenty of new league casters that are kind of breaking
Mhm.
into the scene. Like it happens all the time. I wouldn't say it's impossible for someone to actually just break onto the scene in Legends of Runeterra and go from grassroots to worlds. That is a possibility. I think it's a high cliff, like Blev said. And I think that it comes down to your goals, right? Like if you just want to cast the game because you like the game and you want to talk about it, do community tournaments. Just do it. Just get in. Start going. Talk to people doing community tournaments. A lot of the casters right now that do Legends of Runeterra don't do all of the community tournaments that are going on because that is way too much casting, and a lot of us have a lot of other things that we are doing. So it's impossible for us to cover every event. So there's plenty of events that you can get in and try and cover. If your goal is to try and make a career out of casting, I wouldn't recommend Runeterra as your starting place right now. I would recommend going to games that are going to have more events. But if you really like, Runeterra and you want to start your career here, the same advice applies, right? Like start with the community tournaments and start building out, this reel and building up your skills and getting yourself better and better at doing it, and then seeing where you can take it from there.
Cool.
I honestly thought Mo left.
Oh,
Mo just
no,
he's taking a break.
what? I'm not gonna leave my own podcast. This is professionally ran podcast. Tell me name one podcast more professional than this one.
Runeterra Radio, and it doesn't even exist.
Dude, that was my first ever interview ever for anything. Was Runeterra Radio. And now, 2 years later, actually it's a little bit less than that, you're on my podcast, Blevins.
It's true. How the turns have tabled.
You're such a boomer, dude. You're so old. You're such a boomer. Yeah, that was my first ever podcast. It was because I tortured myself for 30 hours straight and played Runeterra for 30 hours and went from Iron to Masters in one sitting. And then I think I messaged you guys. I think I messaged Saucy. And I asked Saucy if I could be on your podcast because I wanted people to know that I
just remember Saucy messaging me and like, hey, this kid did this video and wants to be on the podcast. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I was like, I just want people to know that I wasted a day and a half playing LOR. And I was like, oh, this could be good,
So what you're saying is you owe all of your success to being on the Runeterra Radio podcast?
No, not at all. But I owe a lot of my success to Giant Slayer, but definitely not the Runeterra podcast. I actually don't know if that did anything. I mean, it was cool. I enjoyed it a lot. It was a lot of fun. But I definitely had people. I got a lot more viewership and stuff after going on to Fight Night, back-to-back weeks. But yeah, podcasts are. Dude, these things are hard. You know how hard it is to coordinate to get multiple people in your podcast every week? Like,
do you know who you're talking to in this call right now?
I'm saying you guys, this is nuts. This is crazy.
Do it.
Yeah, I didn't want to. You know how many people have asked me to do this for a year now, and I just decided to try it 3 weeks ago. And I was like, yeah, I'll put out a podcast every week. I did one podcast that was supposed to go out so my podcasts were supposed to go out Wednesdays. But I actually couldn't get people together. So I ended up going out on a Friday that week. So then I just changed it to being, podcasts go out on Fridays. And then I couldn't get someone the week following. I randomly hit up Puffball Panda the day of on a podcast and she was randomly available. And then this week I hit you guys up yesterday.
The day of you wanted to record.
This kind of sounds like it is a issue, not an issue with podcasting in general.
No, podcasts fucking suck.
How many fight nights have happened? Over 100. So we've had to coordinate, 8 players every week for 100 different fight nights. Yeah, I mean, more people are involved in that now, but originally, probably the first 40 or so, that was just me and you, or just me, or just you.
It was mostly just you.
Yeah, I mean,
I did I can count the number that I did in the early days on one hand.
I mean, so I have no. Mo, just message people at today about your podcast for next week.
You know how busy of a person I am?
So easy.
Do you know how busy I am?
Bro.
Do you have any idea how hard it is for me to know what I'm doing the day of? I can't get people organized a week
If
ahead
you're
of
having a
time.
hard time organizing your life, try out Asana. Use the promo code Mr. Emotional for a free 30-day trial. Asana, it's the way to organize your
I can't
life.
talk to this guy, Bluff. I can't.
Like,
I can't do it.
I'm so
I
busy.
can't do it.
I'm extremely busy.
I can't do it, man. I can't.
I have stuff going on,
poor,
dude. I wake
poor
up
baby
at like
can't get his friends on his podcast.
yeah, I wake up at like noon every day,
no.
and I have to stream, and I have to go to the gym, and I have to like
Bro,
find
you're
time.
not going to the
Dude,
gym.
okay, I go to the gym.
You're seeing my picture being like, damn,
Literally-
I should have went.
no,
and then
no.
being like, you know what? I'm going to flame Blevins because he went.
No, here's the thing. I go to the gym 6 days a week, but I don't say anything because you can't fucking tell. So I don't post pictures of me at the gym because I think it'd be better if people just assumed I didn't go to the gym than for me
Right,
to
'cause
go to
it's
the gym
embarrassing.
and people be
Right.
like, damn, you you go to the gym? Like there's no shot. There's no shot. So
Gotcha.
it'd be better for people just to assume that I'm a lazy fuck than to say I go to the gym, but it's obviously not working.
This is a really long-winded way of saying that you don't go to
No,
the gym.
I go to the
Go
gym.
on.
Trust. I go to the gym.
Blood, does it count like when he goes to the gym and he sits on like one of the machines and just like plays Legends of Runeterra? Is that count as going
Okay.
to the gym or what?
I do
It
that
does
twice a week because I have like 2 days of actually working out, and then the third day is like a rest day. So I just walk on the treadmill for 30 minutes, and then while I'm there, I'm either playing a game of TFT or I'm playing like Legends of Runeterra. But I try and find the treadmill that has a wall next to it, so no one can stand next to me and judge me for playing card games while I'm at the gym. But anyway, this podcast isn't about me. It's about you guys, the
I couldn't tell.
casters. Yeah, it's about the casters here. So there's a big stigma, or I guess I don't know what the word for it is. I don't really know words, but stigma sounded cool.
Sure.
About casters, where most of them are just washed players. Where it was like, if you aren't good enough to be a player, you just turn caster.
So when I changed from Force of Will to Legends of Runeterra, I was coming off of literally being the best Force of Will player in the world for multiple years, and I was like, okay, that was cool. Don't really feel like doing that again. That was a lot of work. Let me try something new in card games. So I came into Legends of Runeterra fully with the intention of being a caster from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And I set it off so that, like I would never enter tournaments, regardless of whether or not I was casting them. Instead, I would like watch the broadcasts and try to learn from them. And part of that was also because I fucking hate the narrative that casters are just washed up players that couldn't make it.
Right.
So I was like, I will never enter a tournament. I will never give anybody the opportunity to think that I am a washed Legends of Runeterra player, which is why you will never hear me on any broadcast say some bullshit along the lines of, well, that's why they're up here and we're on the desk. I fucking hate that.
Blevin sitting over there just like, I've never
I say
said
that
this
all the
once. He says
time,
that all
but
the time.
here's the funny thing, and this is a Mo podcast exclusive.
Oh?
I only sometimes mean it. Like so I like okay, so here's a little peek behind the curtains. Like I'm actually like an all right Legends of Runeterra player, but it's much more entertaining, and I think the dynamic for most casts works way better when I'm just like an idiot like up there talking, but also like saying things that are correct. Like I play it down a little bit, which is nice. But then you go on ladder and you see me every once in a while, and like I got a pretty good record
It's
against
the
pro
Emusives
players.
guy. I can beat him no
Blevins,
problem.
I have never once seen you on ladder.
I don't play often, and I don't think I've ever played against you. But there are
Yeah, that's
definitely
'cause
people whose names
I'm in Masters.
you.
That's why you've never played against me.
I'm usually in Masters.
Were you still going, Blev? You still?
No,
I
I
don't want to
got
interrupt you here. I
nothing.
don't
I got
want to.
nothing.
I don't. The like. Okay, the stigma is definitely like. I don't know. I think it's a weird one. I think it's just like people who not understanding what casters are supposed to be think that like people who just like fundamentally don't understand what a broadcast is. Are people who like actually think that that's a thing. And like I don't know, for someone like me, like I've proven that I can be a pro player. I've been a pro player in multiple games. I like semi-pro league, like professional Heroes of the Storm player. The like 3 tournaments I played in. I don't remember the first tournament placing, but I placed 3rd and 2nd in 4 tournaments, and then I just never played another tournament because I was casting. Because I looked at casting as like I think that there is a much more stable, and like it was like a much more stable and smart career move, instead of trying to be a player, like trying to be a competitive lore player versus trying to become a caster and potentially do multi-game casting, was pretty much just a no-brainer for me,
Mm-hmm.
especially because like the second I started casting lore, my numbers went up like 10x, and then like they kept growing from there. So it's just like, oh well, okay, like this is what people really like watching me do. I had a bit of a knack for it. I'd been doing it for a little while prior in TFT and League, so I kind of had a decent grasp on where to start from, and it just made a lot more sense. Like I think it's a super weird narrative. Some casters are literally just people who have never had an interest in ever playing before,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are some that are ex pros, but like I mean, you can say that they're washed up, but normally it's just like they want to do something else. Like they
Yeah.
want to move on to something else because
Yeah.
they're done. They don't have the passion to just do the pro gaming thing anymore, but they're still very passionate about the game and talking about the game.
Yeah, I don't think we have an AM equivalent, but like I don't think anyone's calling like Fresh Lobster or Manitas like washed up pros that switched to the casting desk. I think they both kind of bowed out in their primes and were just like disinterested in continuing to play competitively and wanted to give something else a shot.
Yeah, I think I don't know many people that like at least I hope people don't legitimately think that way, but I definitely know it's a meme between like friends or like banter, I guess, between or the top like players and the casters will say that. Um but I don't think I've ever heard
Yeah.
anyone like actually say it. I just think it's something that I find really funny when I see like a random Twitch chatter or something be like, "Oh, these casters are so dumb." Or be like, "Oh, casters don't know how to play the game." So I was like, dude, these casters probably know more about the game than you will ever know.
I think it partially comes from the like it is a natural progression in traditional sports for that to happen. Like, oh, Charles Barkley is on
Yeah.
the desk for the NBA because he played, in the late 80s and 90s. So it's like, oh, the casters for video game that's only 2 years old must be washed up retired players. It's like that doesn't even make sense.
We did it a lot in Forza Will, where like if like a big name player like scrubbed out early in a Grand Prix or something, like you would
Mhm.
just have them be your co-caster for the rest of the day, or like you'd grab someone that didn't make the top 8 and like have them do it. Because like that's how I got started casting, was like I didn't top 8 the second World Championship, and they were like, "Do you just want to cast day 2?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, I do." Basically, just like any Grand Prix where I
Yeah.
didn't do super well, I'd be like, "Yeah, let me hop on the mic for a bit."
It's the LSV. But honestly, you should be so lucky to be able to do that because like here's the thing. A lot of the casters, at least in LOR, could very easily be maybe not like top 10 players, but could be like competitive players in a sense. But let me tell you, a lot of you players, nah, you're not. I'm not letting you in the desk. You're not. You can't do it. You don't have the
Dude,
chops. You're trash. You're garbage.
there are so many players that just shouldn't even stream. Like, or they should stream. I shouldn't say they shouldn't stream. But I see casters, and I'm like, damn, every caster I watch that's like a good caster has a personality. Or like, I can hear, like, if you gave me different lines.
It's not a coincidence.
Yeah, I know. Like, you can give me different lines of what someone says. Like, so, like, I don't know. I can't think of one right now, but like, you give me a line of words, and I'm like, oh, Blevin said that. Or like, oh, I could. This is sounds like something that like Jay Doza would say or Boulevard says. And there are so many players that I'll watch their streams and I literally fall asleep because I'm like, you guys have no personality. I was like, I could not see these people doing some sort of stream or some sort of casting. They would just be like, nope, nope, nope. This is like the right play here. And they'd say like a good play or a good line, but there'd be like very small analytics behind it. They would just be like, yeah, you definitely do this thing.
That was a really big thing for me, and one of the reasons that I didn't want to be a competitive player turned caster is because I feel like when you usually grab, like, if someone like scrubs out of a Grand Prix and you're like, "Hey, do you want to hop on a mic for a bit?" Usually, what they tend to do is talk you through how they would have played the game, or the play
Mm-hmm.
that they would have made, or what they're tunneling in on. And it's not about you when you're casting; it's about the game
Yeah,
that is unfolding in front of
Mhm.
you, and you need to pay
perfect
attention
bullet.
to that. Which is why I very much wanted to avoid being like player turned caster, because I was worried that like that is a bad habit that I would pick up, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't have it in me from the get go.
Yeah. Like it always feels a lot better to frame it as like this is why I think they're doing this instead of this is what I would do. Right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
these are the like this is why someone is playing in this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like trying to understand that is a difficult skill, and it's one that as a competitive player is probably good to have, but a lot of competitive players like don't think about that. They just think like what would I have done? instead of trying to
Yeah.
truly get in the brain of like, why is this player doing this? Because at the end of the day, we're storytellers and we're trying to tell the story. We're trying to tell the narrative of the event. So the story isn't what Cast of the Caster would have done. The story is, why is this person playing this way, or what are they doing? And how is that going to get them to the next round, or how is that going to cause them to lose here? How is that going to end their run? Right? Like, these are the things that you want to talk about. So it's just like, it's like worthless to an extent to say like what line you would have done. I think there's like a place to be like, I think this would have been like a really cool option that was available to them. And I wonder why they decided to not do it. That's fine, right? Like, you still have these other things, but end of the day, I really like how Boulevard put it.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of casters like I've never seen a caster just straight up. I'd say never. There's probably been a couple times because sometimes you guys are just fucking ruthless. But there's very few times where I've seen casters be like, "This guy sucks. He should have done this." It's like it's always just like, "Oh, like this was interesting," or it's phrased as like a question a lot of the times, like, "Oh, I wonder like why did that," or it'll be like, "Oh, they did that. They also could have done this," of like list out all the different options. And I know as a player that as soon as you list out like a quote unquote like better option and you're like, oh, they could have done this, I was like, yeah, obviously they should have done that. And I always think it's really cool that instead of saying they should have done this, it's they could have done this instead, as well as like these other things. It's like, oh, these are like that's something where I feel like it takes practice. Where like you could like anybody can tell you like what a better play is, but being able to not make it not sound like you are better than the person playing and they're dumb and you're better and they should have just done this in your play with caster vision, blah blah blah, is like it seems like a unique talent.
Well, that's one of the more fun things is when someone makes a play that you think is like clearly a misplay, and then like I've a lot of us have naturally developed this talent of like, okay, the assumption is that this was a correct play, or at least a play that makes sense. Make it make sense. And sometimes just talking that through will give me a new perspective on like how to approach the matchup, or like how to play a card, or what is a good counter to something, or something like that that I wasn't even thinking about. Because a lot of times in online card games, people get into, not even like net decking, but just like into like same think of things, because it's like, oh, the the best line of play is known, in air quotes, right? So everyone's like, oh, well, you have to do it this way and it has to do this. And that's why I really appreciate the like top level players, yourself included, not to give you too much praise on your own fucking podcast, but like like plays that you make, like when you're in the zone, like peak tournament like watching those plays is like, I would not have done that, but looking back, it makes so much sense that you did. Like the fucking aggro mini morph play. I know Drizoth and all that were analyzing that, but like that's a play that was like, not on my radar at all. But then, you make that play and it's like, well, maybe Mo's memeing, but let's actually let's assume that this is correct. And like, oh, this makes it a 2-turn clock, or whatever the situation was. All of a sudden this makes sense. And now I'm looking at mini morph every time I have it in my hand as something different than just like a defensive option.
Yeah, I went back, as a little side note, I can get too sidetracked. I went back and rewatched it because I was talking with a couple other players, not going to call them out or anything. Not that I guess they watched this anyways, but because they were still telling me it was like wrong and there was no way that was right, and that I only won because my opponent misplayed. And I looked back, and the only way I ever win that game is if my opponent misplays, and only if I set up the 2-turn clock with the mini morph. And so it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, I only won because they misplayed, but that is how you win, and sometimes you have to identify that as your win condition.
I also want to like take a step further here too, because like I people sometimes get it twisted when we say this is like, oh, you can't like casters are afraid to criticize players. We absolutely do. Like, but the thing is you want to start this loop first, right? Like you want to start this, like, assume that they're making a right play. Try it, like walk through, figure it out. If you still don't get there, then it's like, okay, well, it seems like this actually does nothing. And we do call people out. It happens, right? Like if it's truly a bad play or a misplay, like it does get called out, but we don't start there. Because when you start there, I mean, not only like are you going to get it wrong a lot, because a lot of times these players like do have an idea. If it's not the same idea as you, it's going to look weird. So if you immediately just go call it out as being bad, you're probably wrong because you're just thinking a different line than what they are.
Yeah.
But like you can take this. It's always going to be like better to just like take that path and go with it. And if it ends up being bad, it ends up being bad, and you can call it out for being bad. Absolutely, that's part of casting. Is you need, like you point out to your audience, like, this was a mistake, this was a problem, this could have been avoided. There's arguments that go back and forth with the Kachua call at the end of the season where he gets second.
There is no back and forth. What?
You know what's crazy, Mo? Some people have come at me and been like, "That's not even a misplay."
No.
Anyways, doesn't matter. That's besides the point. That's besides the point. This is an example of me on the seasonal broadcast saying that this play, him playing the card, like, was something that people will never forget because it cost him the event.
Yes.
Right? Like, and this is not me saying Kochu is bad, he's a terrible player. This is me saying he made a mistake here, clearly, and this cost him the tournament. And like, it started with trying to talk through like, why would he have done that? But really, you just see the punish come through, and it was a clowny, crazy punish.
For sure, it was just
unnecessary for him to ever play it. That was like the big point of it.
Yeah, he gets the like sub 2% punish, right? It was like 1.3% or something like that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And dude gets hit by it. Still, granted, it should have never happened. But it's still good to see, like, it's like, it feels bad when that happens. Is there a protocol for casters to just straight up flame players? Like, is that something that's like a personality type trait where you have the like Simon Cowell of casters, or is there something where your prod team is like?
Look at Freak in League of Legends.
Right.
Look at Freak in League of Legends. Right. There's no reason you can't. It's just generally frowned upon. Generally frowned upon. Because like, people who watch the streams aren't going to contextualize it and think 17 steps ahead. That's your job. Right. They're just going to hear you say player bad, and then they're going to go harass them on Twitter and call them bad and call them shit and make Reddit threads and like so I love Freak. I'm not trying to like flame Freak here, but I just like, I don't love when that stuff happens personally. I just don't think it's good. I don't think it's good practice. And I think like, there's no reason you can't. It is personality. Like you said, the Simon Cowell casters, like, you can definitely do that. There are tournaments where I think it's like funny as hell to do it. There is a time and place, right? But I just think that like, most of the time, our job is to lift these players up and make you want to root for them.
Yeah, create like a narrative and a story.
Yeah. In what world is me flaming a player gonna make you want to root for them?
Yeah.
Here's the other thing too, is like, all that is true, and on top of it, like, if you're watching a broadcast, like, some people might get joy out of like, oh, haha, player made a bad play and they got punished, yeah, get wrecked. A lot of times, like, people don't want to see that, and they don't want to hear it, and they don't want to have it called out. Like, it's like watching, like, Curb Your Enthusiasm. It is like manifested cringe. And some people like literally can't even watch that show because they're just Larry David puts himself in the most awkward situations imaginable and then ramps it up to 11. And it's like actually painful for people to watch that.
Yeah.
If you just like every single thing, it's like, oh, nope, that was a misplay. Oh, that was a misplay. I would have done that. I would have done that. You sound like an asshole, and people aren't going to like you, let alone the cast. And if people don't like that, and they don't like the cast, then all of a sudden you start not getting hired back for jobs. And also, it's just not fun. It's not helping the narrative. It's not helping anyone, right? Like, you're literally not helping anyone, yourself included. Like, you aren't even helping your own self. Like, actuallying your whole way through a broadcast. It's not compelling content. It's like, if you do it as a bit, or it's funny, I'm all for being brutal or being, mean if it's funny. But if it's not funny and you're just pointing out something and it's just like everyone feels bad about it, like, who is benefiting from that?
Yeah, and on top of that, a lot of these players didn't necessarily sign up to be put under a microscope like that. Like, if you want to be the best Legends of Runeterra player in the world, like, you're going to have to be on camera. There's no getting around that. But like, you didn't sign up to be a streamer, right? You didn't sign up to have all of your plays put under a microscope. You just kind of signed up to go play it the way it is. And that happens a lot for narratives more so than misplays, where like, it's no secret. What Am I was not in love with the fact that I ran with the narrative that he hadn't won a tournament in a year and a half last season. He called me out on Twitter for it. It's perfectly reasonable to do. But it was also perfectly reasonable for me to make that call. And like, you need to use your judgment about like, like Cass said earlier, you're not here to tear these players down, but sometimes the most compelling thing about them doesn't paint them in the best light. But you do also need to keep in mind that like they didn't sign up for that.
Right.
Look,
Yeah,
here's another example of that, right? Is like Boulevard saying Random is like known for throwing. That is true, right? Like this is an objectively true thing about Random in the highest pressure
Yep.
tournaments, is who is normally a phenomenal player in Random 7 makes uncharacteristic misplays in high pressure scenarios. And Boulevard called that out, and well, it happened again. And guess what? Random was like, yeah, shit, that happened again after it was said. And that sucks because he's the first person to admit it. And it's part of a good narrative because it actually, in that highlight, is a negative thing, but it does kind of make you want to root for him because you're like, he's this very good player and he just can't quite make it over the hump in these high pressure tournaments. And he keeps beating himself, even though he's like so good. He just keeps beating himself. He made top 2 and he beat himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
that ends up being compelling in a narrative. And that's the important part.
Yeah, when you guys are talking about how people don't sign up to be microscoped and stuff like that, I mean, obviously, like, at this point, I've very much signed up. You know, I've signed up. I've made my bed, stuff like that, of like who I want to be. People flame me all the time. I've made this weird fucking persona on Twitter and stuff like that. People comment on my YouTube videos like, "Oh wow, podcast Mo is so chill," blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, it's because I'm doing a fucking podcast, dude. I'm not, being crazy. But on Twitter and on my streams and stuff, it's obviously a whole different like character thing. But who I really feel bad for are the people that don't decide to be these content creators and stuff. Not even just like, oh, Majin Bey didn't decide for this. He just so happens to be streamed a lot. But like his opponents. I hate when people start flaming or going crazy on these like actual like people randoms that people don't know because they make a mistake and it just so happened to be broadcast in front of 1,000 people. And it's just like, yeah, Majin Bey had like 3 different opponents during seasonals that just handed him a free game for no reason. Majin should not have topped this last seasonal. But I feel bad for the opponents that threw in front of, hundreds of people, more than 1,000, and then just sat there and had to go back and watch it and then just got like flamed for shit by 1,000 different people. And that to me is kind of like, feels bad. And that's why I like when casters don't do that. Because, I've been there where I've thrown or done something shitty and gotten flamed for it. But it's different if randoms that no one listens to or really watches and stuff like Reddit threads flame you than the actual person casting the stream and that like the voice you're hearing is flaming you for it. So I think like the whole flaming casting thing, I noticed that no one does it, and I was just wondering because I appreciate when it doesn't happen, obviously to me.
Yeah.
If it was like maybe like production or your company says like, oh, don't be rude, blah blah blah. Or if it was like a unwritten rule of casting, or if it was just like one of those like, if it's in a funny bit way, go for it. But if other than that, then probably stay away from it.
Well,
honestly,
I think Blevin subbed it up really well, right?
Right.
It's
I think Blevin did a great job.
It's an unwritten rule, but also like it's not really a rule. Like you can, it's just doesn't make for compelling content.
Yeah,
so,
I used to do it a lot more than I do now, and then I got to a point where like I'd see someone misplay and I didn't really want to call them out for it, and then like Twitch chat would be like, oh, call them out for it. I'm like, I started getting put into situations where people like expected it from me, and I'm like, that's not the kind of caster that I want to be.
I see. Yeah, well, we as players appreciate it, or at least I can say I appreciate it. I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to throw a finals match, go back, watch me throw, and then on top of that, hear somebody say how I threw, and hear someone talk about like how shit
I
I
hate
was.
to break it to you, Mo. If that does happen to you,
Casa will bring a tear to your eye with how heartbreaking they make it sound that you threw the finals. I will roast the shit out of you.
That's hilarious because that was like the angle with the Kachua one, right? Like I never went to aggressively go after. I tried to make it as much of a like story as I could, right? So
we'll be like we'll go back, we'll do a replay, and we'll be like, yep, this is the exact moment where you can see Mo, like his heart is broken, and it's like he had a chance, he was ready for it, and he just he looked at his hand and he clicked the wrong thing. He just couldn't He just couldn't close it out. He just
So
couldn't
this is
get there.
this is the Casanova version then, Boulevard. That's the Casanova version of it, and then
Yeah.
the
The soundtrack starts playing in my head. I'm like, yeah, you know what? It is heartbreaking that Kochua played a 0-mana card.
Oh my goodness. You guys, Blevins, you're too much. You're too much, man.
That's what my doctor says.
Oh, okay. Well, on that note, I think that's going to be the end of the podcast. So Blevins can go talk with his doctor. But let all these people know where they can find you at. Here's your shout outs, and we'll start with the good old Boulevard.
Yeah, shout out to Boulevard and nobody else. One of these days I'll tell you all the backstory on that whole thing, but you can find me on Twitter at Caster Boulevard. And I think that's really the only thing I feel like promoting.
You don't have like an OnlyFans or something?
Not yet.
Okay.
You know, I do I'm not gonna lie, constantly I'm looking at twitter.com and I think like I could just post my balls. Like Twitter allows that. Like I could just do that. I think about that often.
Do you think
Why
that would
though?
help or hurt your
Oh, it
your
would hurt
caster?
it would hurt so bad, which
It's
is why I don't
pretty
do it.
rough.
But, like I
This
do
is
have
pretty-
the option there, and I like Twitter
Yeah.
for that.
Casanova?
Man, it's hard to follow that one for sure.
Casanova, where can they find you?
But shout outs to Boulevard and Boulevard only. And then you can find me on Twitter at Casanova Casts. You can find me like actually casting over on Giant Slayer TV every Monday. What do I have coming up? That's a good question to myself. No casts announced. So okay, well then I have nothing else to share. Currently.
Wait, what about the thing on Saturday?
What?
Or do they not? Is that not public?
Do I have something on Saturday? I don't have anything on Saturday.
Blevins! Where can people find you at,
I don't know what
Blevins?
he's talking about.
You can find me _Blevins on Twitter. And yeah, giantslayer.tv. And sign up for Fight Night because we opened up the Fight Night signups for all the Fight Nights.
So
Do that.
can anybody sign up for it? Or is there? Because I signed up for the TFT one, and they said like, oh, you have to be like masters. Is there any restrictions for this one?
So anyone can sign up. Whether we bring you on the show is not a guarantee,
Mhm.
right? That's how it is. But like,
you're not like signing up and like first 8 people get on. It's like sign up and
Right.
we look at all of them and we pick from them.
How many signups have you guys gotten since you've opened it? Like quite a few.
Do you even know, Blev?
I do. I will say it is a good number. It's a lot.
Yeah, I assume there'd be a lot. I assume there'd be a lot of people that wanted to sign up to show what they got against these
I will say
top
it.
players.
It's between 1 and 200 people have signed up.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
That is a large number. And then, of course, my name is Mo, and you can find me on Twitter and stuff, and all my links will be in the description at Emotional. So that's it for this week's podcast of the All Heart No Fluft. I'll see you guys next week if I can find people to be on it and stuff.
Just invite them now.
Dude, I'm busy. Do you know what I have to do immediately after I'm ending this podcast?
Go to
Yeah,
the gym.
invite
I
people
guess?
to your next podcast.
No, I have to go get 10 more levels in Lost Ark so I can play PvP with my friend. Do you know how time consuming that is? Oh man. But all right.
I can't talk to this guy anymore.
Yeah, neither can I. Bye.